Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this Nebulous live development series. This is day 7, hour 1, and I'm sorry for the lag in video uploads. I'm about a day behind. I was supposed to use yesterday as day 7, but I wound up kind of sleeping through that. So I kind of missed a day, but now I'm back. So today is going to be day 7. This is the first hour. And without any further ado, I think I am just going to start getting some work done here. I was under the impression that I might rant for a little bit, but as soon as the video starts, that desire kind of fades out, so I'm not going to bother this time around. More or less, it's just being very honest and upfront about how this could make me feel sometimes. The idea of the game I really care about, and I think it would be fun to play, and I like the idea of the game, but that doesn't mean that I'm motivated beyond measure every single moment to put all the pieces together to make the game. And as I've discussed before, whatever that spiritual pressure is disappointing because I really do want to make this game, and I want this game to be a reality, and I would like it to help support me in my life. But despite all of that, it doesn't help it feel any better from step to step getting the work done. So I apologize that every once in a while the pressure steps in. These videos do help push beyond that by sort of putting me under a microscope to a certain extent, where I'm committed to getting work done for a straight hour. Outside of that, though, the spiritual pressure is very often present, and it can have an effect on my ability to produce maximally. So I appreciate that I have this opportunity to invent these ideas, and I appreciate that I can use these videos to bust through this spiritual pressure. Alright, so that's all I wanted to mention was still have the funky feelings over here interfering with my progress. But now that I've discussed that, I am going to get started because I have a lot of hope for this game and I have a lot more work to do. Alright, so last time I was sorting out these elements for tech research investment by the player. The main issue is that it just doesn't match up to the game view, so I have to come in here and manually tweak these sizes, and I'm going to put them all the way down to 4% since it was still a little too big. Same thing here, we're going to tweak this, put it at a percentage of 4. And then we'll grab the label, and we will change the label to be like 0.000, which effectively gives the player the ability to increase the tech value by close to 10,000%, which I could even be more specific and come in here and give it a percentile, just to signify that this is a percentage. That might mess up how many times I can run it across the screen, though, so we'll have to see. And this will effectively, if we assume 1 economy per 1,000th of a percent, then it takes 1,000 money to raise 1%. So you're looking at like 1 million to max the tech, basically, if my math is not incorrect. Maybe 10 million or whatever. So I'm going to leave it like this for now. It might not fit properly. Let's see what else we have. So active selection information. And I have this, what the heck, hold on. Okay, first element has a button, a label, a button. and it needs another label. I'm going to bust this open here. It's going to need another label. And before I put that label in, I might as well drop in another visual element. Put these three in here. And then sort these out real quick. Make sure that they are organized properly. And the centering seemed to work well. And then this first element will have to get duplicated. And now we can add another label to the element as a title value. But it needs to be above this. And it needs to sort these up top to bottom. And now we have the label value in these values. And more or less, we might as well, like this element background might as well be black. And it looked like it had a manual size also. So we'll make this black, but background the label is white. And same thing here, we'll just background this whole visual element as white. And then we will have to manually adjust the text value color to be black. Same thing here, we'll make sure this color is black. And then we effectively do not have a maximal label, so let me see if I can... Oh, this is the entire label. So if I do like a space out thing, doesn't have a lot of options in that regard. So let me grab this and check out the alignment properties and set them to maximum. See if I can stretch them out here. Okay, so that stretches, but its alignment is a little bizarre. So let me shift this back like this. And now we have this element here inside of this first element deal. And I think this element doesn't have any size constraints. I'm not so sure this one does either. It does have a shrink value, but that's about it. Alright, so how does this look in the game view? Okay, so the plus and minus are backwards. The label's a little weird. Maybe bold it. And the sizes of these buttons are still huge, even though they're tiny in here. Okay, so let's run through all this. So I'm going to bold this, and for some reason I decided to break when I did that. Okay, so that's better. Same thing, I'm just going to bold these. Even though it, okay, so that's bizarre when that happens, but so be it. Jump back into the game view, and is that any better, or? Perhaps a little bit. I have to remember to swap these buttons here. If I can find them in the hierarchy. It's easy enough to just swap them like this. I have to come back and name them differently. But for now, I'm just trying to, and then honestly, the sizes are still too big. So let me see if I can force this size down even further here. And I guess I might have forgotten. Oh no, I don't think so. Okay, so if I run something like this, the width, I might even increase the width. And it just doesn't look like it's working. If I say so myself. Alright, so now I've got, let's see here. So this label and this button within this first element thing. Which does have a height that's supposed to be conformed to 4 stacks. And the idea is to duplicate this element 3 times, more or less. So if I do that, it still winds up making sense to use an element row, basically. So effectively, if we drop this in here, the idea would be to run this in like this, and set the elements to this. And I might have to jank these around. So it's centered, centered. God, even though that's grotesque looking. It's absolutely grotesque looking. It's just straight up fucked up. Alright, so let's see what happens if I do the duplication. Alright, so let's see if I stretch these. Oops, hold on. What happens if I stretch them instead? I'm going to have to open up the elements alignment options. Okay, so it still looks bad. Okay, so let's just see how it looks in the game view. And it looks absolutely terrible in the game view. Man, yeah, I just like, man, son of a gun, dude. Son of a gun. It should not be this complicated, in all honesty. Like, all the elements are set to hard-coded values, and shouldn't be, like, I shouldn't be meeting this resistance this hard. It shouldn't be. Screwing itself up so hard. Okay, so that's centered. Also, what if I change these values here? So there's just nothing going on differently there. And these alignments really don't matter. Although that is the whole, okay, so the visual element, then there's the first element, but it's not containing the second visual element properly. How come this is the case? There's some stretch. Okay, so I just don't understand. In all complete honesty, this shouldn't be. It's just not working properly. The label should just be. For some reason, it's just fucked up. I don't understand. Wholly and utterly, it's just fucked up. And it was working so well down here too. So now I'm wondering about, like, for some reason this visual element isn't registering properly. And that is basically what's screwing this up. So left to right proper. What happens if I change it to a grow value? That doesn't do anything either. I guess I'm just going to have to yank them out and give it a rebuild here. I don't know what else to do. So if I yank out these two visual elements, and I'm stuck with this, now I'm looking at this visual element being broken. For whatever reason. Now I've got this label. This label is also broken. So it's just fucked up. So the ship research label, and we have this visual element, which is more or less the first row. Just call this first row. Then I'm going to yank out this element here. And I'm going to, let's see, if I set it to row 1, it will just fill the space. Oh no, the row, yeah, okay. I've been having some mixed results with row though, so let's see, if I duplicate row, it will, I suppose it's accurate, but I've been learning to just, like, use the size value, kind of. And by using the size value, it's just going to set itself to a parental height. 32% makes some sense. So if I run them in here, grab the element, oh, it's going to have 4 values if I go like this. Then I can, once it yanks them out, possibly set a, I mean, I guess what I'm really trying to do is call this ship research values, and this bad boy is actually 100% of its container. And this is set to 32% of its container, which if I yank it up to 33%, does it... Okay, it's a little weird. I'd have to get affected at other places. Okay, so see where this is a little off point. This entire element is supposed to basically go down here. So it'll lead me to assume that the other elements more or less... What are they at? 32% also? So if I tweak these back to 33%, let me see how this looks. Okay, so that's a little better in terms of that spacing. There's basically like 0.5% in between these, which is okay, I suppose. And now the element is actually split into the label and the research value, which means now I can do 0 to 100% of these elements. And this will have to be changed to up and down. It will need visual elements for the rows, so we've got row 1, and the idea is to have 4 rows. Although, okay, so for fitting's sake, we've got more or less all of these need to have a percentage height, and the idea was running with this 24% since there's 4 of them. So let's see if that works properly or not. I can say 24% and it knows what I'm talking about. Okay, good. And then row 4 is 24%, and it's of the parent, so it should in fact force these all to be the same size, more or less. Okay. And there might be a slight gap in between these, which there is. Which kind of leads the idea to be making this background color black. Just for the oh, it is black. And then its values don't have any color, but we can make them white. And ideally they will probably have this gap built into them. So now we're looking at something like this, which is still slightly inaccurate because this... What, now this needs to be black or what? Basically. It might change things up, but it's going to set these values up properly as long as this would have to shift though. Okay, so let's just see what happens. It might all revert at some point. So the next step is to have this row contain 3 elements. One of the elements needs to have 2 elements itself. And the first of those elements is simply a title. And are we getting this funky error again, where it's not acting as a... Label should just be inside of its parent, like, no questions asked. Okay, so let's check the text out, and if I tweak the size, does it fix it, or... No, the label is still janky. Alright, so it's a... For some reason the size isn't... Okay, it is affecting it, but there's no boundary. And it's topped, but it's not set to any grow value. The element... I don't think its size property has changed. I guess that kind of works. And is that really half of it, or? It doesn't seem like half of this guy. So yeah, I'm not sure why the text is fighting with me on this. Perhaps the grow, maybe if I make the grow 1, and then change the text through there, it still doesn't look like it's 50% properly. So if I make this 100%, or hold on, so this, then I change the label size. Now the label's auto-sized, but its element is at 100%, and it should arguably be 50%. So if I change this element to be a height of some percentage, 100%, then this element is... It needs to be set to its 100% for this to work. That's just because I parented it, I guess. So if I come here and change the size on these, let me see here. Did I fix this to have a grow value, or no? So if I fix the size on these, then I should be able to say 50% here and say 50% here, and they should just be exactly the same size now. Okay. Alright, so let's keep going here. We've got the remove button, we have the text, and we have the add button, basically. Whoops. And from here what we have is this element needs to go left to right, centered, makes sense. It'll scale down. And the example label here was something like this. And then the buttons were a plus sign and a minus sign to signify an add and remove. And this label would technically be ship damage or weapon damage. and we were running into issues where the size of the button was not accurate. So I had to come in here and tweak some of these values. Let's take a quick look at this. If I take a quick look in the game view, it's sort of setting up properly. The buttons are still like ginormous for what I'm looking for. So let's take another look. If I model it against this over here, we've got a button that all it does is changes its size. That's all this button does. So like I should just be able to set the size and it should be fine. And then all its container does is stretch the content. So I was imagining that this was going to go a lot quicker than this, as quick as this went, but it's the UI is fighting me hard on this one. So if I take a look here, ideally we would grab this element. Let me see where it's at. So row 1 has a visual element here called weapon damage. And for weapon damage, which is properly organized, the idea is to just add 2 more of these in here, with the alignment properly going left to right. So we might as well take row 1 and tweak its margins, or perhaps its padding by like 0.1%. And did that do anything, or that might have just barely done something? So let's bump it up to 1% just to see for sure. Whoops, typed in the wrong spot. Okay. So it looks like it did in fact set it to 1%, but this has a, looks like this has a background color of white, or so I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess it's because the row has a color of white. So if I change the row color to black, then the whole thing screws up. And that's just because these have to all be white, or and it's just inevitable we're going to need some gaps in these. So right now they're what, set to 30 auto width. Real quick, let me see if I can do a space between option. Doesn't really change anything, so I'm just going to have to yank these 2 out, and I'm going to tweak the width on this to be 32%. That way, ideally upon duplication, there will be some spacing, and there is. Except for now the buttons look janky, so let's see what it looks like in here. And the buttons are still stupendously too big. And it also looks like the elements don't. It almost looks like they're expanding too. And they kind of are here. So let me change this to centered. And I'm going to change internally, change it to centered also. And it still just looks funky. I think it's looking worse than it was earlier. So let's see here. So I'm getting into this funky spot where I'm trying to like, what, manually define the size of the buttons or something? like 3%. And it doesn't even look like they are updating properly anyways. Oh, it's because I wasn't getting this side. And I suppose our containing element is going to have to get set to scrunched, like this. And they still suck. It's just not, I don't understand. I really don't understand. To be completely honest, it's exactly as it should be defined. This is a percentage of its parent, which is this thing. And this thing is only so big. This should be a percentage of its container. And that should be the end of the story. However, now that I'm looking at this, this element is not actually fitting into its parent properly. It's too broad here. Let me just double check that it's just not even containing its elements. I call this a test element name. Really quickly, I'm just seeing if it'll like magically start working or something. Nope, it's still fucked up. Perhaps the alignment or the flex. So it said it's got to shrink to one property. It should technically. I don't know why this is happening. I don't really have any other way to describe it. I guess it's this thing. So if I were to come in here and perhaps tweak this text size down to like 11, if it's in there, but the buttons are still too big, and then now it's not even showing up over here. Man, maybe this is why I was meeting the resistance, because it just wasn't going to work out properly. All right, so. I apparently can't change my names back. Perhaps if I change the text size of the buttons, it will make them a little smaller in the game scene. The element itself is, okay, so it's not exploding this time around. And I'm changing this label size to like 11. And then these two elements should in fact match with this. So this is all seemingly accurate here. And the buttons are still too big. And they're pushing themselves out of the game view. No, back off, kitty. Back off for now. Alright, so centered and expanded. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why this one just all comes together properly. Like, not combining the buttons in the text is the only real difference here. They even have way larger words and it still scrunches properly, so like, it's got automatic height. For some reason, oh, it's 35%. The text size is 11. That's the only issue I can imagine is it's not playing fair with the text element for some reason. With the label. I've even manually lowered their sizes all the way. What if I flex shrink them? Okay, so they're still too big. The only other thing I can imagine would be actually dropping their size all the way down to 1%. So if this doesn't work, yeah, I'm literally clueless as to how to do this. Like, I'm not able, for some reason I'm not able to change the size of my buttons properly. Give this a second to compile here. So like I can click these and stuff, but they aren't playing fair with the label element is the only thing I can imagine. It's the only thing I can imagine. Which is lame. I wanted to write it like this. Alright, so that's the last idea I've got is to... Man, this is just stupid. It's fucking stupid. Alright, so let's yank out both of these, and let's see, how does the button look scrunched down to 1%? It's still just way too big. So like, it's not shrinking. Let's see if it will do anything different with the wrap element set here. It's still too big. It won't shrink, it won't... Looks like it's not going to align anything. The size is already manually set to 1%. That should be the be-all end-all of the discussion. it's got manual margins set. Let me see if what happens if I change all these to 0. Now the button is extremely small. And it's also extremely small in the game. So maybe that was the problem, was it was hard coding from the margins. So now this bizarre 1% size. Hold on, flex. So let's beef this up to like 5%. 5%. Maybe 35%, 25% or something. Okay, so now I'm managing to retain more rational control over the size of the element. Had something to do with those margins and paddings having a default value that wasn't accurate. Okay, so well, at least that's figured out to some degree. So let's go in here real quick, and I'm going to say auto. I'm going to auto the size. And I'm going to see if I can scale the size using the font size. So I bump this up to 12. It does change the size of the font, or it does change the size of the element. Alright, so I'm going to, now that that's sorted, I think I can very likely come in here and go back to what I was trying to attempt, which was putting a button label and a button together. This button needs to make sure that its margins and paddings are 0. It's going to have auto size. Text is going to be a plus sign. Oh no, wait, excuse me. This is a minus sign. This one's a plus sign. So this has a plus. It has a shrink flex. I still don't understand exactly how that works. Its internalizations are okay. Automatic sizes. 0 on these. And then text size is like, what, 9? And I'm very likely going to change the button color, but and I guess it is centered in that one. Okay, so if I go like this, some semblance of the buttons going like that. This is centered, so the buttons shouldn't be unaligned from this. Excuse me, sorry about that. Alright, so I might be able to squeeze in all of these now since it's giving me a slightly better value here. Okay, so I want it to be centered, and then this whole thing should be centered. And that's close. The buttons are a little tiny though. Alright, so effectively, I also want the borders to be different. So this ship values needs to have a slight line here for dividing, for visually dividing this. And to do that, I'm imagining it having a white background between these, so I would effectively have to flip all the colors on the panel here. So let's see how that will go. It would have to be... Okay, so this thing has a white background. Or let me double check here. So color, background color, black background. So if this thing has a white background, then more or less its parent should have a black one. It's next to irrelevant though. This whole thing though, yeah, right now I guess it's a white one. So as the should values, it might be easier to do border colors for this. Otherwise, this would have to have a white background. And then this new panel would have to have a black background. The label would have to have text that is black, or white text. White font here. Maybe have the button be white. And then have the text be black on the inside. And those are centered, but this one is just weird. For some reason, it won't center all the way, it looks like. Okay. So let me see how this looks. Okay, it looks split up a little better. It looks like I'm probably going to want a little bit of padding, though. And the buttons are just too small. Okay, so I've got to... I'm going to have to shift the size of this text down to like 10 or something. And then bump up the button's widths to like a little higher. I guess we can try 8% to start. Okay, let's take a look at this. I guess they could be even bigger. The font could even be a little bigger. So let's do one more thing here and grab the weapon damage total element. I always forget this one. I think it's the padding is one, maybe set 1% padding on the inside. And it doesn't even look like work, to be honest with you. So I'm pretty sure margin's on the outside, padding's on the inside, I'm pretty sure. See, like it works in here, but it doesn't work in the actual thing. Yeah, see, that's on the outside. It's not what we're looking for. Maybe I can just change the left side padding to be like 2% or something. Just as a test. Let's see if this... It doesn't look like it, really. It just looks like it's recalculating incorrectly, so I'm just not gonna worry about it for now. And instead we're going to increase the size of this button up to 10% width. It's still just tiny as hell. Alright, so I suppose that's pretty close. It's hard to say that, it's hard to tell this is a plus sign and a minus sign. So let me check the text size element here and do something like this. And it screws up the height. But it does add the ability to kind of see it a little better, I guess. Alright, so I'm going to double check in here, this thing. The actual label, it's all centered. It should... Like, it would be nice if it just looked like this. The other thing in the long run would be to change the background color. So that way all 12 of the values, like, are a different color. And color these differently, that'd be pretty cool. For now, I suppose it's working pretty good. I just have to remember how to traverse into this properly. I might be able to change this in the long run to say combat values. If the weapons buffs start to affect stations also, it might be prudent to shift it. Okay, so this, oh, okay, I see why. Alright, so row 1 has weapon damage, and if I start to duplicate these, and then take a quick look at how it's aligned, besides for this W clipping here, it's basically correct. So I'll give I'm not so sure because I tried a few things that didn't work very good. Like it already has a left-right manual padding value. What happens if I set this to 0? Okay, I've set this to 0 and take a look. It's still a little jacked. which means I can change the font size or try to add a... I guess the first thing I can try is change the font size. And I'm just going to delete these two now that they are different. So I'll check out this one, and if I change the font size, it might be a little harder to read here. So let me just see if I shift this. Oh, the other thing is that it's not set to center. Let me center it. Let's see how it looks. And it's still missing some padding value. So if I actually change the size to 11, whoops. So this whole thing doesn't actually have a text value. It's the visual element label here that has one. And it is expanding. Let me set this to centered. And let me double check, like, so this is set to flex scale 1. Let me set this to 0. Its margins and paddings are all 0, and its text size is at 12, and it's centered. Okay, so for some reason the text is like ignoring the padding, so let me just... Oh wait, actually the other thing I wanted to try was just changing the font size to 11 and checking if that will be at least a little better. So let's see if I can center this properly. The font still might be a little too small. It might be just big enough on a full 1920 by 1080, but I guess that remains to be seen. Alright, so part of what I'm kind of going for here is I would like to have this border around the elements in the same fashion, but because it's white background, it's not going to work to have a black background on these edges. Okay, so now, well, alright. I suppose now I can just send these through here. And as long as they look correct, I should in fact be able to get all 12 of those values set up again. But before I do that, looks like I'm going to step away for a second. Let's see, I've got about a minute left here, so let's... Man, this is also making me really want to, like, build all this with code to a certain extent. Even though I can't take advantage of the UI builder does help for iterating on this stuff, I guess. So let's see, if I duplicate this, this is now weapon range, suppose. That's so, okay. Weapon rate of fire. Which is where I could say damage range rate of fire. For consistency, I guess I can go like this. And they should copy in properly. Everything should look alright. Okay, so that's in the right direction. It may need some color differential, but effectively it's in the right direction. So in the next video, this is essentially what I've got to keep working on. I've got to fill in these values as much as possible, and specifically get to the point where I can bump these values. So if my economy is at 10, and I come down here and I like start increasing the economy value through the tech, over time it should actually increase how much this value contributes, is basically the idea. And same thing if I get to like the scan range, scan frequency, it essentially provides a global buff to these. And that's the whole idea. So thank you for watching this video. I'm very sorry that I spent a whole hour just screwing around with the UI builder, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.